Hi guys, Mr. Talbot here for you. I'm making a video over topic 1.4. This is going to be over feudalism. We're looking particularly at what's going on in the Middle Ages of Europe as well as Japan around the same time period. Remember, this is something we're doing in place of ingenuity, so make sure you're taking notes. Pause the video as you need to. We're going to try and emphasize a few key points, and those are great things to be taking notes on. So when we think about feudalism, we always think about kind of knights and chivalry and samurai and terms like Bushido and stuff like that you may have heard of. But it involves more than just kind of the people that are fighting. It's kind of the whole social system is going to kind of change. Zooming in on Europe real quick to kind of give you some sense of what's going on during this time. The Roman Empire started as a republic, grew. We kind of hit that at 1.3. There were a series of things that we hit earlier in 1.2, I should say. The empire is going to collapse. Well, when the Roman Empire was doing its thing, it was really, really powerful, amazing military, kind of unified Europe and parts of Southwest Asia, North Africa, all kind of within the same political unit. Well, when that goes away, something's got to fill that vacuum. We're going to see in North Africa, we're going to pretty quickly see in our next unit kind of the golden age of Islam and the spread of Islam across that region. We're also going to see, though, another empire form these, but in Western Europe in particular, instead of one big entity, we see kind of lots of smaller kingdoms, and then those kingdoms are even going to be broken up. We're going to see what will be important and definitely something worthy of taking note over is the Roman Catholic Church is going to be really, really influential at this time. And they're going to kind of be not just like the spiritual and cultural unifier of Western Europe at the time, they also are going to provide a lot of social services. They're going to collect taxes, they're going to provide schools and charity and food and all sorts of things. But the flip side is they also are, with that, they're getting very involved in politics. They're endorsing kings. Kings are fighting on their behalf, but the church is involved in a lot of not spiritual stuff like assassinations and engineering kind of overthrows of different leaders and stuff like that. So kind of a mixed bag there, but the influence of the Catholic Church is kind of replacing the influence of the Roman Empire, but not as directly. We're going to see kind of things get worse in Europe after the uh, Roman Empire collapses. A lot of times we think about history, we think about, okay, well, things are always just getting better over time. That we see with the Dark Ages, that's not necessarily always the case. Now, there's a lot of good in the Dark Ages, a lot of really cool architecture and stuff, and feudalism's got a lot of positives. But as far as a interconnected region, technological developments, that kind of stuff, we're really going to see Europe that's going to go in reverse from what they had been doing with the Romans. Like I said, the big thing was that Rome was providing the protection. Rome was keeping people safe, and because of that, uh, you could have trade and that kind of thing. When the Roman Empire goes away, bandits and pirates and Vikings eventually are going to kind of start attacking people, and people are less safe. People are less willing to travel. That includes merchants, so you're not going to see a lot of trade. And people kind of felt the need for protection. So what kind of is literally going to rise up in the countryside are all these castles that, if need be, a town can kind of run and hide in it should, a bunch of bandits or whatever come. And so, you know, the castles can only be spaced out far enough for, people to be able to get there quickly. And the time before cars and whatnot, these are not huge regions. And I mean, if you go to Western Europe today, you're just going to see castles all over the place because that was just how necessary it was. I remember when I went to Ireland, it was, by the time you see your fourth or fifth castle, they kind of get old to see. They're just everywhere because that was how people were providing protection. Um, so we're going to see in kind of the next slide kind of how the social system is laid out. But the big stuff to emphasize right now is at the top, you're going to have a king, and the kingdoms are different sizes. But then below the king, you'd have the nobility, and they would kind of be the ones that lived in a lot of these castles. Some of these castles would be huge and massive. Some would be kind of small, but they got their land from the king. They promised to support in the fight for the king, and then in exchange, the king was giving them this land, and then they were able to kind of force the people that live there to work for them. Um, the other thing to emphasize here is your peasants or serfs are obliged to live on the land and to work on land. You don't have the freedom to go and work somewhere else. So Feudalism is really effective. It provides protection. People are safer. That's kind of why the system is going to rise up. But the downside is the majority of the population is in this peasant class, and they're having to give up their freedom in order to get that security. So kind of looking here, kind of the way the system is set up. And I'm going to move myself here so you can kind of see. Um, so kind of starting on the right-hand side here, we've got your king at the top, then his vassals. You can kind of see what's going each way. So a fief is a piece of land. And with the land, the peasants or the serfs are tied to it. So if you give someone land, you're also giving them the people that live on it, and they are then forced to work for you. You've got to be loyal to the king. You got to fight for the king. Kings don't have their own military at this time, so they are completely dependent upon the lords in times of war. And so during times of peace, they're going to have to kind of be doing things to help out. Below the lords, you got these knights, and you're seeing they're getting kind of some of their own land and stuff like that. They're getting food provided by the Lord. And then the peasants who actually produce all of this food are having to turn around and they're, producing all the food, but then they're only given a little bit back. Anything extra they make just goes to the knights and the lords. So there's no way to kind of profit as that. The other side of this, we talk about how the Catholic Church is really influential. Catholic Church also had, a lot of loyalty. One of the interesting things about feudalism is you're born into whatever class you're in. And for particular, if you had multiple sons and you were higher up on the social structure, that could be a bit of an issue because if you're a knight, only your oldest son can be a knight. You can't have both sons become knights. If you're a king, you're probably gonna be okay because you control all the land. But for these lords and these knights, only their oldest son could inherit. So what they turned to, and they would kind of use their influence to get, well, maybe my second oldest son could become the bishop since he can't be, a lord or something like that. So you're going to see literally relationships forming in Europe between the church and these lords. And that's where kind of the spiritual realm of the church is kind of only part of what they're doing. They're very much involved in these politics and providing all of these things. The other thing, because it's not safe to travel really in this time in Europe, within each lord's area or kind of smaller level, I mean, you get down to the manor level, that were kind of self-sufficient. They produced all their own food they needed, all the goods they needed. So there's not a whole lot of trade going on across Europe and the rest of the world. There's some, but just not like what we had been seeing during Roman times. So next thing we want to hit on that's going on is the Crusades. So around the year 600, a new religion comes on the scene led by this guy named Muhammad. That's the name, and that's the religion of Islam. And so Islam is going to grow really, really fast. Within a couple hundred years, it has kind of taken over all of what you see in orange. So you're going to see it push all the way into Spain. But in particular importance to the Christians, who we talked about in the last video, kind of became the religion of the Roman Empire. There's this desire to retake what they were going to call the Holy Land, which was held by Muslim rulers at the time. Call it the Holy Land because this is where Christianity as well as Judaism began. So places like, Israel and Syria and whatnot, kind of right down in here. Long story short, on the Crusades, a lot of terrible stuff happens, and in the end, the Christians are unsuccessful in retaking the land. So still to this day, almost all that territory is held by Muslim rulers, the exception being Israel. But that's not going to happen until much, much later. And lots of civilians get killed during this time. And as you might expect, this really creates distrust between the Europeans and the Muslims. These Western Europeans also went over and destroyed some Eastern European cities, so there's actually distrust within Europe towards each other. And this was kind of orchestrated by the Catholic Church. So again, that the Catholic Church is pushing this military operation. When the Crusades are defeated, the Muslims are still in control of this really valuable trading territory. So you've got gold coming out of Africa is going through this region here. You've got all the goods from India and China are coming through this territory. They're not going this way because it's too cold through Russia. So if you wanted to trade, the only way you could do that was to go through the Middle East. And so this is held by Muslims. So that's kind of a big part of why the Crusades happened, was also not just to take their religious sites, but also to get control of these trade routes. It's unsuccessful. Now the Muslims are really not trusting these Christian Europeans. So We're going to see the Europeans in a couple hundred years are going to have to figure out another way to get there, and that's going to launch the age of exploration. But in the meantime, people still want some of this stuff, and so a few European cities are going to still be able to create enough good feelings with these different Muslim merchants, and they're going to become really important trading cities. Particularly, this is going to happen in Italy, places like Venice and Genoa, where Christopher Columbus is actually from. In our next video, we're going to touch on Japan. And so we'll kind of leave that there for this time.